Hello, I'm Ed Fuquay, Young Adult Librarian Extraordinaire here at Woonsocket Harris Public Library.
And I'm Miss Gabby from the Children's Department.
We're here to continue our discussion of fictional witches.
Yes.
Did you like the list we had last time?
I did. I thought it was really cool. And then when I went home, I did more research about it, and I found a lot more things out about them, which is really cool.
Yes, we have. It's a very popular aspect in fiction.
Mm-hmm.
So last time we had a list of almost entirely female witches.
Yeah.
Well, witchcraft is associated frequently with women. However, there's plenty of also of male witches as well. Once I started thinking about it, I got some suggestions from people after last week's broadcast. Someone immediately suggested Merlin.
See, that just flew over my head.
Yeah, I somehow didn't even consider him.
No.
Even though it's appearing on Netflix and have a gigantic ad every time I go to Netflix for the Merlin
Yeah.
series, it somehow didn't enter my mind that he's one of those famous wizards of all time.
Mm-hmm.
He's a huge part of Arthurian legend. So almost any King Arthur story will feature Merlin in playing some role. Sometimes he's responsible for Arthur being born. Sometimes he's responsible for making sure that Arthur gets Excalibur, the sword that he needs to become king. Merlin himself was born from a woman and a demon, according to one story.
Wow.
So he's technically half demon.
Isn't that very offensive when you really think about it, just a little bit?
Well, he was born with magic powers. He didn't have to learn them anywhere. He gets them innately because he was literally born with the blood of a demon inside of him. It's almost never held against him for some reason. But then the Arthurian legends are mostly on that crux where Christianity, until the Holy Grail stories, most of the King Arthur stories have a very pagan feel to them,
Okay.
with like the Green Knight and all those things.
Yeah.
The idea that Christians would actually tolerate someone who was half demon, again, in later years that wouldn't just work that way.
Yeah.
He's every King Arthur project, every film, every movie that has something about King Arthur will probably have a version of Merlin. And some of them he's completely benign, like in Sword in the Stone, the Disney cartoon,
Yeah.
where he's kind of a bumbling old man who is very powerful and very knowledgeable, who's a mentor to young Arthur.
Mm-hmm.
In others, he's more scheming and manipulative.
Yeah.
When he was doing the Catherine Britton series for Marvel UK, Alan Moore had a version of Merlin who was an out-and-out villain. He manipulated everyone to suit his own ends, uncaring what the finished results would be. In some of them, he can actually see the future. There's actually a version of Merlin in which he's living his life backwards.
See, I've heard about that version.
Yeah, he's living his life backwards, so he knows what's going to happen. I can't remember what he just did.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a weird way of looking at things. But despite his ability to predict the future, inevitably he's taken out of play as the King Arthur story goes on. He's seduced and drawn away from Camelot, usually by Nimue, who is sometimes also the Lady of the Lake.
Mm-hmm.
Now, she's actually getting her own Netflix series, a series called Curse that just started, with a young girl who grew up to become the Nimue of Arthurian legend. It just hasn't happened to her yet. She's starting out really young. Sometimes it's a fairy named Vivienne who lures Merlin away. But the mentor has to go away at some point, so the hero can be left alone to stand on his own 2 feet. So at some point, Merlin will vanish, leaving King Arthur to his own devices. And all the whole Holy Grail cycle and everything comes after Merlin is well out of the picture. There's a really good series of TV movies starring Sam Neill as Merlin.
Okay.
He's good at playing kind of a anti-hero kind of character. The series, the BBC series that's running on Netflix right now, has a teenage Merlin who's growing up in Camelot with a teenage Arthur, who start out hating each other and wind up becoming friends. And they lay all the establishment of what's going to happen later as they start to grow up. And this is a period in this version of continuity in which magic has been outlawed, so Merlin has to keep his powers secret.
Okay.
Some critic pointed out that at the time the show was created, Smallville was very popular, and it's literally exactly like Smallville, where he has all these powers, but he has to use them so no one can guess he really has magic / superpowers.
That's what all shows do, though, at this time of age. They all just go off each other.
Well, part of the appeal of magic is that it's a secret world.
Yeah.
You have to be initiated into it. You have to get that letter to Hogwarts. You have to learn those spells and things like that. That's one of the things that makes magic, kind of work. But one place where that doesn't work is The Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
Because I totally didn't mention Gandalf last time. Gandalf is by far the most famous wizard in literature,
Yeah.
bar none. Gandalf was inspired partly by Merlin, and that he plays a mentor figure to like the Hobbit and some of the other characters, and also partly by Odin from Norse mythology.
Okay.
The great cloak and the wide-brimmed hat and so forth was also trademarks of Odin when he wandered the earth looking for magical secrets to steal and bring back to Asgard. Gandalf, although he is very benevolent and is a very good mentor to people, he's also kind of rude and off-putting sometimes. He can be very menacing and threatening when he wants to be.
Yeah.
So he's not that much of a benign father figure. And also, J.R.R. Tolkien cleverly writes the plot so that Gandalf is conveniently off-screen whenever the heroes really need them. Because the mentor can never actually be there when the heroes need them the most. So Gandalf, brought to life by Sir Ian McClellan brilliantly.
Yeah. Very good.
In the old Lord of the Rings cartoons, he was voiced by John Huston. His marvelous, like, rolling, gravelly voice that brings a lot to the character.
Yeah, Gandalf's voice always just like, I don't know, it was very nice.
He has to be. He has to have that powerful voice. That was a big part of his appeal. Several critics have also pointed out that Gandalf doesn't do that much in the movies or the books.
Mm-hmm.
He's really super with fireworks. He can talk to eagles. But so far as, like, you know, casting bolts of energy and things like that, he seems a little, like, not all that useful. But still, he is one of the characters that, like, half the wizards in fiction are based on. Either Merlin or Gandalf pretty much inspired every wizard. Now, moving away from that into more of, like, pop culture, one of the ones I thought of also was Doctor Strange from Marvel Comics. Did you see the Doctor Strange movie?
No, I haven't.
It's a good one.
So, Doctor Strange, what's the main concept about him?
Basically, he is a world-famous surgeon. He's a
Okay.
neurosurgeon. At the top of his game. He's also very arrogant and full of himself. Very egotistical. He's not a nice guy when his story begins.
Yeah.
However, he has a tragic car accident. In the original comic book, it was because he was drinking when he got into the car. In the current version, he's trying to text while drive. But either way, he has a horrific car accident that leaves him so badly injured he suffers neurological damage. And his hand shakes so badly he can't operate anymore.
Wow.
So he loses the one thing that he's best at in all the world. He responds to this not very maturely by falling into an alcoholic stupor and giving up on life and pretty much everything. Benedict Cumberbatch plays him in the movies, does a very good job with him. Does a very good job making him sympathetic, even though he's kind of a horrible person for a big chunk of the movie, which is a good choice. Strange eventually hears rumors about some weird place off in the Himalayan mountains, possibly Tibet, but they're kind of fuzzy about that in the movie version.
Yeah.
He goes there to study with mystics who have a magical way of healing, and he goes there and discovers that he has an aptitude for magic. The same skills that made him a superior surgeon, which was his like encyclopedic memory, his ability to learn things really quickly, and his tremendous motor skills and things like that. The very things that made him a terrific surgeon also made him a terrific magician.
Nice.
So it turns out really well for him. And the comic books, it takes him years of study to become a master magician. And then many years later, he's granted the title of the Sorcerer Supreme, the most powerful magic figure in the Marvel Universe. In the movies, it happens a lot faster, as things tend to do these days. His way of spell casting involves lots of like weird gestures and things like that. Benedict Cumberbatch once joked while shooting a photo shoot for Entertainment Weekly, "I have to be careful, if I hold my fingers wrong, it'll blow up the entire wall."
So pretty much like a different hand gesture was
it does different things,
Wow.
And Cumberbatch was totally into that. Now, humorously, Doctor Strange was invented by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, who also did Amazing Spider-Man. And Ditko loved drawing people doing funny things with their hands, because Peter Parker, to fire his webbing, has to hit the sensor in his palm, so Peter Parker is always shooting his webbing like that. So if he had a chance to draw Peter Parker like that, then he started drawing Doctor Strange doing all of these weird incantations and things like that. Several rock stars have admitted that the whole thing with like devil horns and things like that came from Doctor Strange originally.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so they invented that. So Doctor Strange was really popular for a long time. His own comic book was never that successful in a lot of ways. He was a perennial guest star, though. He wound up appearing in everybody's book because he was the magician in the Marvel Universe. As a kid, when I read his stories, the problem was there was no real limit to what he could do. That, in my opinion, as like a child, there was far too many stories where he'd be in trouble. All of a sudden, wait, I haven't used the mystic wand of Watum yet, and he'd pull out some mystic artifact that would inevitably defeat the bad guy and save his bacon.
So there was kind of like no like ground.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the movies, I noticed they gave him a few specific things he can always do.
Yeah.
And I presume he can also like read spells off a scroll and things like that. But like they give him a couple of things that he can do anytime. That's really easy for. They're visual, so the audience can see what's going on, and very easy to understand, and things like that.
Okay.
So that was in some ways an improvement over the comic book version, who was in some ways overpowered.
Mm-hmm.
So he's the top magician of the Marvel Universe,
Yeah.
way far and above any other magician. Other characters are magic in the Marvel Universe. Technically, the Scarlet Witch is often considered an actual witch, although she's also a mutant, and they've kind of fudged on that over the years. In the movie, they fudged even more by saying she's created by the energy of the Tesseract.
Yeah.
And in the movies, she can move things telekinetically and enter into people's minds. In the comic books for a long time, she had the ability to alter probability. She could hex things to make unlikely things much more likely to happen, which was a superpower that's kind of silly in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
They've used it very effectively in some instances. Like in the comic books, the villain Ultron is terrified of the Scarlet Witch because she's a robot who operates completely by science. And just being around Wanda in the comics, she can alter the probability of some of his circuits short-circuiting.
Yeah.
To the point where it's almost impossible for him to short-circuit, to where it's inevitable he's about to short-circuit. And he has no science defense for that. There's no force field, there's no laser beams that can stop her from doing that. There's a character named Dr. Voodoo. He's kind of a problematic black character from the 70s, and Marvel was introducing a lot of minority characters. He was originally Brother Voodoo.
Okay.
He was a black character written by white guys in the 70s. So he suffers from all of those. He was kind of an interesting attempt to come up with something new, though. He was a physician, a very skilled doctor, who didn't believe in magic, but his brother did. His brother was a practitioner of Voodoo. And when his brother died, his brother's ghost showed up to inform him about an evil menace that's facing the world that only like they can fight, and teach him magic. So he had his brother's ghost as his mentor, and for a while his brother's ghost was like his sidekick. He could go out and like spy on people invisibly and things like that.
It's a little weird.
He eventually felt kind of guilty by keeping his brother from going off his proper reward, so he eventually like let it go on into the afterlife. Yeah, Dr. Voodoo was a much cooler character now. They defined his powers much better. He's not as as racist as he was before. He's still not that popular a character though. He used to show up only when there was like zombies to fight. Because zombies, voodoo, is basically all they could do in his opinion. It was problematic. But he's much better handled now.
Good.
Now, DC, on the other hand, has a bunch of magical characters. DC has a lot more magical characters. Some of which have made it to film, some of which haven't. The most powerful magic user in the DC universe is Dr. Fate.
Okay.
Are you familiar with him at all?
No.
Yes, well, he's not actually a character, he's a helmet.
Oh.
He's a gold helmet that covers the entire head. Dr. Fate is actually the helmet. His name is usually Kent Nelson.
Okay.
And however, the helmet belongs to a Lord of Order. There's an eternal struggle between order and chaos going on in the DC universe. And as a Lord of Order, he's been sent to Earth to like correct things and make them less chaotic, which fortunately allows him to generally function as a superhero. But there's some confusion as to whether the helmet is actually in charge or the person is actually in charge.
That's what I was gonna say. Like, what's it like when you put the helmet on? Is it like, I don't know, you put it on and you magically have like powers?
Sometimes the helmet takes people over and just walks them around like puppets.
Wow.
He was created in the Golden Age by Gardner Fox, and the Golden Age characters, sometimes they were tossed together really quickly without considering the implications, and like decades later, writers sit down and go, man, this is really screwed up. So get this, Kent Nelson is a little kid, like 8, 10 years old.
Yeah.
His dad's an archaeologist in Egypt, finds this tomb, discovers this like gold helmet. Now the father dies from poison gas inside the tomb, Indiana Jones style.
Yeah.
The little kid is sitting there, locked in this Egyptian tomb with a helmet that then floats in the air and says, Kent Nelson, put me on and you shall, fight crime as Dr. Fate, which the kid does. And when he dons the helmet, he instantly becomes an adult.
That's weird. weird.
It's extremely weird. No one in the golden age of comics back in the 40s noticed anything odd about that, but writers in modern times have realized that the spirit inside the helmet obviously magically aged Nelson to adulthood and made him into the perfect vehicle for them to operate in the world.
Okay.
Yeah, so in a lot of ways, although Kent Nelson appeared to always be in control of the helmet, he really had no choice but to be Dr. Fate. For a while, he was free from the helmet. His girlfriend Inez wore it for a while, became a female Dr. Fate. And that got the idea that he could be passed from one person to another.
So what happened when he took off the helmet? Does he turn back to his actual age, or did he just stay the same age?
At one point, he died,
Oh.
which is how he originally lost the helmet. He came back to life again because comic books.
Okay.
But for a while, his girlfriend Inez wore it, and then it passed on to some other people as they tried to recreate the character again and again. In the current continuity, I think it's Kent Nelson again, and he's gone back to his old origin. But they could change that.
Wow.
Dr. Fate was used in the Smallville TV series. When they resurrected the Justice Society of America, which Dr. Fate was a big part of. A part of his shtick in the Smallville episode was that he could see people's fate. Like he saw a teenage Clark and Lois and instantly knew that they'd be together forever. At one point he says to Lois, "You are his destiny." She's like, "Whoa, back off, pal."
Calm down.
Yeah. Because to Fate, it's obvious, of course. He's not the most popular magic user in the DC universe. He's a lot more popular. The first I'm going to name is Constantine. Constantine has been around. He was created by Alan Moore. He was spun off of Swamp Thing. He's been around since the 80s. He's basically a down-on-his-luck, trench-coat-wearing, chain-smoking guy. He looks kind of like a bum, often needs a shave. He's kind of a jerk to people. He's a tremendously powerful magician. He's had a life that's so filled with horrible tragedy and basically bad things happening to him. The shtick about Constantine is that he can help other people, but no one can ever help him. He can never undo the damage that he's done, the friends that he's lost over the years. When you get help from Constantine, you have to be aware that it's probably not going to come out the way you expect.
Yeah, it's like a genie. Just be careful with
Yeah,
what you wish for.
well, he will always do the right thing. He is a very good person. But you know that old moral dilemma? Should you kill an old person to save a baby or something like that? Yeah, he would totally kill the old person without heartbeat. Yeah. He tries to be pragmatic and practical about it. And he sees himself as being clear, level-headed, not like those goofy superheroes and their capes and everything. He makes fun of Superman and Batman all the time. He's as much of a hero as they are, but he also understands that magic is about sacrifice.
Yeah, it is. Magic comes with a price.
Yeah. At one point in the comic books, he was dying from lung cancer from all the smoking that he was doing. And that was the one thing that he didn't have any magical cure for. So before the end of the storyline, he wound up selling his soul to two different demons, both of whom were going to have a war over who gets him, because he screwed both of them over so many times over the years. They both want to drag him down to hell. And they realized that they were equally matched and couldn't fight each other.
Yeah.
So they're forced to leave Constantine alive.
Wow.
So he walked away from terminal lung cancer with two demons warring over his soul. So yes, he actually saved his own life by selling his soul twice.
That's funny.
That's Constantine in action.
That's funny.
There's a not very well-received movie starring Keanu Reeves, who is distinctly not British or blonde. Keanu tries his best. He really did try to get the character down. It has a toned-down version of the lung cancer story, but they completely give him a happy ending, even though the comic books makes it completely clear he doesn't get a happy ending.
Yeah.
The very last scene in the comic book is, after everything's said and done, he walks away and he pulls out a cigarette and lights it up. In the movie, when Keanu Reeves goes through all this crap, at the end of it, he picks out his cigarettes and throws them down and walks away.
He said, "Oh, lung cancer."
Hollywood allows him to have a happy ending. The comics always denied him because he's done so many awful things in his life. In some ways, he doesn't deserve a happy ending.
Yeah.
Probably the most popular magical character, apart from Constantine. Oh yeah, apart from the movie, he's also been appearing regularly on the WB shows. He had a short-lived series of his own. Then he started guest starring on Legends of Tomorrow. He's been on the Arrow series, where he saved Oliver Queen's life early in his career. Actually, Oliver saved his life and owes him a favor. He has to get someone's soul out of hell. He managed to call up Constantine and get his assistance. So he's with Legends of Tomorrow now. He's wandering around in a time machine with a bunch of superheroes, basically.
Nice.
Which is, it's not his shtick, and he feels very uncomfortable. And they play off the humor of that quite a bit in the show. The most popular DC magic user is Zatanna.
Okay.
Zatanna is very cool looking. For several decades, her outfit consisted of fishnet tights and very short shorts and a man's like tuxedo top with tails and a top hat. They've since established she doesn't dress like that all the time, but that's her stage persona. That she
Okay.
dresses like that when she goes on stage. She's a stage magician. She's a legacy character. She's the daughter of Zatara, who is a real Golden Age hero from the 1940s, who passes magical knowledge on to her. Zatara was a ripoff of Mandrake the Magician from the comic strips. He was a stage magician who actually could practice real magic. And so he would pretend to be a professional stage magician, but also secretly fight evil demons and monsters as Zatara.
Yeah.
And Zatanna took over as a superhero in her own right. She was a member of the JLA for a while. She's a recurring character on Smallville again, played by Serinda Swan. Part of her shtick is that she can cast any spell she wants if she can pronounce the words backwards.
What words? Like the word.
What words that she wants to say. I'm not going to try to reproduce some of her spells here, but
Oh, so
like if she's injured, she has to say the words heal me backwards.
backwards.
Like M instead of me and Lee instead of heal.
Oh.
Which is tricky. In the middle of a fight, when someone's shooting laser beams at you, it's hard to do.
Yeah.
It's also hard to do if you're, tied up and gagged, which happens to Zatanna way too often.
Oh no.
She's had her mouth magically fused together, almost any trick in the world. The demon that fused her lips together discovered the hard way. She can also cast spells by, with her own blood, by cutting herself, and writing the words backwards in her own blood has the same effect as speaking them.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it didn't end well for that demon.
Crucial.
But she can basically, if she can say the words, head explode backwards, she can make someone's head explode.
She's cool.
She's a very cool character. She was in the current continuity. She's in a relationship with Constantine.
Okay.
I won't say a romantic relationship. Let's say a difficult relationship with Constantine. She tries to represent the good side of magic, and Constantine just doesn't give a damn.
Yeah.
He makes jokes about them meeting in a tantric yoga class at one point. I'm not sure whether he was just bragging or whether they really did. But she also had not exactly a romantic attachment, but she has a long friendship with Bruce Wayne. When Bruce Wayne was going through his years of training where he wandered the earth finding different people to train him in different arts, he wanted to learn sleight of hand. So he went to John Zatara, the most famous stage magician in the DC universe at the time. And at that time, Bruce Wayne was in his late teen years, and Zatanna was a couple of years younger. She was like 16, 17 probably, and he was 18 or 19. And they were well attracted to each other. It may not have been a completely romantic fling, but they definitely liked each other a lot.
Yeah.
And there's a great episode of the Batman, the animated series cartoon, where she comes back. And she's already deduced that Batman is actually Bruce Wayne, because she recognizes some of the tricks that her father taught him that he's used to fight crime. So Zatanna's a very cool character. From the world of books outside of comics, I wanted to mention Harry Dresden from the Dresden Files series. This was a short-lived series on Sci-Fi Channel. It's been commissioned again by yet another of the infinite number of television networks. Jim Butcher is a down-on-his-luck, trench-coat-wearing private eye wizard who lives in Chicago. He's a good wizard, but he has a bad reputation. He was forced to kill his mentor, which is really frowned upon.
Yeah.
Basically, the Dresden Files takes the private eye tropes and uses them all in magical terms. Instead of, there is a mob boss in Chicago who has to deal with, but also has to deal with packs of werewolves, groups of vampires, and things like that. It's a long-running series, very complicated world building. In this world, no one technically is supposed to know that magic is real. He nevertheless still works as a consultant for the Chicago Police Department. Whenever they have a crime that makes no sense that they can't solve, they'll call him up and have him, take over. So that's been a good series, been running for quite a while now. Many people like it, some people don't. My wife didn't like the world building on the show, on the series rather. And I think we're running out of time. We are actually. I have so much more to say. I haven't even gotten to Bed Knobs and Broomsticks, my wife's favorite movie.
Part 3?
Okay, we'll do a part 3. We'll definitely do a part 3. I have a whole another sheet of notes I haven't even gotten to yet. So we'll come back for part 3 of Fictional Witches and Warlocks. We'll do that next time. Until then, I've been Ed.
And I'm Miss Gabby, and we'll see you next time.
Take care and be safe.
Bye.
Bye.